The distress beacon had been pulsing for 6 standard hours before anyone aboard the ISV Concordance worked up the courage to respond to it. And even then, it wasn't one of the crew. It was Mara Ellison. She was already pulling on her field jacket before Commander Sethriel, a Vothi with 3 decades of deep space experience and a scar that ran from his left gill to his chin, had finished reading the sensor report aloud. He watched her with all 4 of his pale eyes and said nothing. There was nothing to say. The data on the screen told the story plainly enough. A Kale Vera had crashed on the moon's surface. A Kale Vera. The name itself carried weight in every known language across the interstellar compact. Ancient. Apex. Unmeasured in the oldest records. A predator so deeply engineered by millions of years of brutal selection that even thinking about one in close proximity triggered the prey panic reflex in most species, a full neurochemical flood of terror that bypassed rational thought entirely. Vothi warriors had been known to freeze. Dorothi hunters, whose own species sat near the top of their homeworld's food chain, had been documented fleeing at the scent of one. And one had just crashed, injured and cornered, into a shallow ravine approximately 400 meters from their landing pad. The wound signature suggests significant trauma to the dorsal ridge, the ship's med scanner reported in its flat tone. Estimated pain index, critical. Behavioral prediction for an injured Kale Vera in distress, extreme aggression. Survival recommendation for any approach within 40 meters, not advised. Sethriel had relayed this information to his crew. His crew had agreed, collectively, to stay on the ship. Mara had not been part of that conversation. She was already outside. The moon was cold. Silver-gray dust puffed under her boots with every step, and the thin atmosphere carried a faint smell of ionized rock and something else, something copper-dark and animal. Blood. Old blood and new blood both, and underneath it, that deep musk that the xenobiology files always described as primal warning signal and which Mara's hindbrain processed, she supposed, the same way everyone else's did. She just didn't listen to her hindbrain very often. She could hear it from 50 meters out. A sound that had no good translation in standard, somewhere between a grinding of tectonic plates and a scream, low and enormous and filled with something that was not quite pain and not quite fury but was made entirely of both. The rock walls of the ravine trembled faintly with each breath the creature drew. Mara slowed her steps. Not because she was afraid, or rather, not only because she was afraid, because she was not a fool and some fear was simply accurate information, but because she understood animals. She had understood them since she was 4 years old and had climbed into the enclosure at her uncle's rescue farm to sit beside a half-dead stallion that 2 veterinarians had declared too dangerous to approach. She had sat there for 3 hours, just breathing, until the horse had pressed its enormous trembling nose against her knee. She understood that the worst thing you could do to a suffering creature was to rush it. She came around the last curve of the ravine wall and saw Kale Vera for the first time. The files had not prepared her. The files never prepared anyone. The creature was vast, easily 12 meters from the armored crown of its skull to the barbed tip of its tail, its 6 limbs folded in angles that spoke of real structural damage, the great dorsal ridge she'd read about torn and bleeding freely, the bioluminescent lines along its flanks pulsing in ragged, arrhythmic distress patterns. In better condition it would have been breathtaking. Injured, it was heartbreaking. Its eyes, all 6 of them, in a staggered row along its angular skull, snapped to her the moment she appeared. Every muscle in its body locked. It made a sound like the world ending. Mara stopped walking. She held very still. She let the sound wash over her and through her and past her, and when it faded she exhaled slowly, deliberately, and said in a voice pitched low and calm, "I've got you, easy buddy." Silence. The creature's nearest eye tracked her, a burning amber disc the size of her torso, with a vertical pupil that had contracted to a razor line. It was reading her. It was deciding. She stayed still. She kept her hands open and low at her sides. She did not look directly at the eyes for too long. She'd learned that from working with big cats, that direct sustained eye contact rate is challenge. She let her gaze soften, dropped it slightly, breathed out again. "You're hurt," she said, keeping the same low murmur. "I know. I'm not going to make it worse. I just want to look." Another sound from the creature. Lower this time. Still a warning, but something in the frequency had changed. She had spent enough time with enough animals to know the difference between "I will kill you" and "I don't know what you are and I'm scared." Both sounded enormous when they came from something 12 meters long. But only one of them meant she needed to back away. She took a single step forward. The creature flinched. Its damaged ridge flared. She saw the bioluminescent lines spike red, a color the xenobiology files listed as acute pain response, and it made a sound like grinding stone that became, near the end, something almost thin. Almost plaintive. Mara's chest ached. "Yeah," she said softly. "That hurts." "I know." She sat down on the ground. Right there, 4 meters away, on the cold gray dust of a moon orbiting a gas giant whose name she could barely pronounce. She sat down cross-legged and rested her hands on her knees and did not move. Just breathed. Just existed in the same space without threat, without demand, without the energy of approach. In her earpiece, she heard Sethriel's voice, very quiet, "Ellison. What are you doing?" "Working," she murmured. "Our sensors show the creature's stress hormones are still at." "I know." She kept her voice level. "Give me time." She didn't know how much time passed. The moon's light shifted slightly, the distant gas giant painting slow amber across the ravine walls. She sat. The Kale Vera breathed those vast, labored breaths that shook dust from the rock walls, and watched her. Its eyes blinked, in sequence, slowly, and she recognized that too: recalibration. Reassessment. The threat is not moving. The threat has not moved. The threat is not behaving like a threat. She began talking. Nothing important. She talked about the ship, about what she'd had for meal ration that morning, about the gas giant's color and how it reminded her of October light back home, back on Earth, when the leaves turned and everything smelled like wood smoke and cold rain. She talked about the stallion she'd once sat beside for 3 hours. She talked about how much she liked the color of the creature's bioluminescence in the non-distress range, the cool blue-white she'd glimpsed in the files, how beautiful it must look in the dark. The Kale Vera's pupils slowly dilated. At some point, she didn't mark exactly when, it lowered its massive skull to the ground. Mara waited 5 more minutes. Then she stood, very slowly, and walked forward. The creature watched her. Its pain flare lines pulsed again when she came within 2 meters, but it did not move. She crouched beside the torn dorsal ridge and looked at the wound with her med scanner, and her voice stayed steady and calm even though what she was seeing made her professionally furious at whatever had caused it. "Okay," she said. "I'm going to give you something that helps with the pain first. Just a pressure injector. You'll feel cold for a second." She worked for 2 hours in that ravine. When she finally stood and walked back toward the ship, the Kale Vera was breathing slower, steadier. Its bioluminescent lines had shifted, not to full resting blue-white, not yet, but something warmer. Amber. Watchful. At the ravine's edge, she paused and looked back. One enormous eye was still tracking her. She raised a hand. Not quite a wave, just an acknowledgement. "I see you. You're still here. That's enough." Sethriel met her at the airlock, flanked by half the crew, all of them staring at her as though she had just walked through fire and found the other side pleasantly temperate. "How?" he said. Just that. One word, all 4 eyes wide. Mara pulled off her field gloves and considered the question. "It was scared," she said finally. "It was hurt and scared and alone, and nobody came." She looked back at the ravine, at the amber glow still faintly visible against the gray. Sometimes all anything needs is for someone to sit down and say I've got you. And mean it. Sethriel stared at her for a long moment. Your species, he said slowly, is profoundly strange. Mara smiled. She didn't disagree. Behind her, on the cold moon floor, the Kale Vera closed its eyes and rested for the first time in days, breathing slow, breathing steady, watched over by the only creature in the known galaxy too stubborn, too gentle, and too human to stay afraid.